Good evening. February 26th of 2020 was the last time I was on the stage, and we had Maria Pia Paganelli here, who was president of the Adam Smith Society at the time, and she was worried about their international conference in Japan taking place, and it was like 2 or 3 days later that Japan shut down. So we've come a long ways, a little over two years. I'm glad to see that we have a nice turnout for tonight and our speaker. This is the fifth, I can't say annual anymore, fifth Adam Smith lecture sponsored by the Boise State Economics Department. I'm Alan Dalton, a member of faculty in the Economics Department. Start, I'd ask to make sure you silence these. At the end of tonight's speech, extra credit slips, which you should have filled out as you came in, will be collected by students from the Economics Department. As you exit the ballroom, make sure you exit the back. If you take out the side doors, there's not going to be anybody there, and then you'll have to run into everybody and go in the opposite direction. Funding for tonight's event was provided by the Charles Koch Foundation, who generously let me use some leftover funds from 2020 for tonight's event, as well as several donations from local supporters. I'd like to recognize them. Jeff Moore, Don Anderson, Don Grant, Bob Rathbone, and Larry and Sharon Johnson. I'm not sure if any of them are here tonight, but I was told that 3 of them would be, so let's give them. The Economics Department has established the Adam Smith Lecture Series in order to bring to Boise State campus nationally and internationally recognized scholars who have deepened our understanding as well as have extended the work of Adam Smith. Adam Smith was an 18th century Scottish moral philosopher, and he established his reputation with 2 works, The Theory of Moral Sentiments and The Wealth of Nations, which continue to enlighten and inform us concerning the 2 spheres of interaction that humans engage in. First, the intimate sphere of personal exchange, which is characterized by friendships, family, and voluntary non-market institutions such as churches and clubs. And then second, the impersonal sphere of market exchange, which gives occasion to specialization and division of labor that has produced the wealth that the West enjoys. It is my great honor to introduce tonight's speaker, one who has considerably added to our understanding of the relationship between the 2 spheres in Adam Smith's work. Bart Wilson is a professor of economics and law and the Donald P. Kennedy Endowed Chair in Economics and Law at Chapman University in Orange, California. He is a member of the Economic Science Institute and a tenured professor in the Argyros School of Business and Economics and the Fowler School of Law at Chapman. In fall 2016, he helped found the Smith Institute for Political Economy and Philosophy, for which he serves as director. Bart has published papers widely in economics and general science journals. Listen to some of these that are either forthcoming or recent. The Journal of the History of Economic Thought, the Adam Smith Review, the American Journal of Primatology, study of primates, Oxford Economic Papers, the Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, Scientific Reports, Experimental Economics, and Nature Human Behaviour. His research has been supported with grants from the National Science Foundation, the Federal Trade Commission, and the International Foundation for Research in Experimental Economics. Prior to joining the faculty at Chapman, he was an associate professor of economics at George Mason University, and before that, a research scientist at the Economic Science Laboratory at the University of Arizona. He started his professional career as an economist at the Federal Trade Commission. Bart received his PhD in economics from the University of Arizona and his BS in economics and mathematics from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and he is a proud son of the state Wisconsin, I won't say Virginia, son of the great state of Wisconsin. His other two books, with the Nobel Laureate Vernon Smith, was our first Adam Smith lecturer here. He co-authored Humanomics, Moral Sentiments and the Wealth of Nations for the 21st Century. In that book, Wilson and Smith explain how Adam Smith's model of sociality can rehumanize 21st century economics by undergirding it with sentiments, fellow feeling, and a sense of propriety, the stuff of which human relationships are built. This provides an understanding of why standard neoclassical choice models fails to explain how people conduct themselves in their personal relationships with family, neighbors, and friends. Integrating the insights from both the theory of moral sentiments and the wealth of nations, that book brings into contemporary empirical analysis, the goal of economic betterment as a science of human beings. Wilson's latest book is The Property Species, Mind, Yours, and the Human Mind. What is property? Why does our species have it? In this book, Wilson explores Smithian insights to consider the basis of how humans acquire, perceive, and know the custom of property, and why this might be relevant to understanding how property works in the 21st century. I won't say any more because Professor Wilson can say it far better than I might. Tonight's lecture is The Purpose of Property, Experimental Evidence on Adam Smith's Insights. Please welcome the 2022 Adam Smith Lecturer, Professor Bart Wilson.
Thank you, Alan, for that very generous introduction. And thank you for ordering such a beautiful day to visit your city and university. I was delighted to receive this invitation. I've been given invitations to present on property in my book, to talk about Adam Smith, and to talk about experimental economics. But this was the first invitation I received that asked for all three in one presentation. And I'm very excited to share that with you. So, I'm interested in why we have property. And I wrote a book to go through these questions that I couldn't get from talking to my colleagues around the university. So when I worked with professors in humanities, I asked them what they thought about property. They tell me that it's something that from Western Europe, it's unique to Western Europeans, it's something kind of modern. Hasn't been with us very long. It's something about the capitalist system. I would talk to my friends and co-authors in primatology. What do they think property is? And they would tell me that all sorts of animals have property. And so the point of this project as a social scientist is to go straight down the middle and make nobody happy with what I think property is. So this book, I can wait if you'd like to add it to your shopping carts. It's a product of about 10 years of reading across different fields, and it's motivated for this very basic question: what is property? And after talking with my colleagues in biology and primatology, I'm curious, I want to know why is it that we actually have it? And this is coming from being trained as economists, that we talk about, and you'll notice this in your principles books, about property rights. And so you see here that the concept and idea of property right, however, is pretty new. That is modern. It's coming from the 19th century. But property goes much older. So what's this difference between property rights and property? That's why I have the question, what is this? What's the difference? What's that relationship? Because property seems to be much older than, say, the 19th century. And my claim is this: property is a universal and uniquely human custom. Every one of those words matters. And I want to go through this and why I'm interested and excited to talk about Adam Smith with you, is because the specific aim then is to bring out how as a custom it is moral and how that morality might work in that custom. So I'm going to start with the first claim, that it's uniquely human custom. So this is a red squirrel. You'll notice on high alert. The hair is extended to make itself look bigger. It is pretty aggressive. It is looking at someone that is intruding on its particular territory. It is a larder hoarder, which means it makes big pockets of deposits of food, and therefore has to be quite vicious in defending against other red squirrels. This is one example that the biologist would tell me of other animals that have property, because they will describe what this red squirrel does is treating a tree in the backyard as being its own property. They'll also bring up scrub jays. Scrub jays, this is one going through an exercise, where if there's another scrub jay watching and it's burying some food, as soon as the onlooker goes away, it digs it up and reburies it. And it's being described as theft. It's prevention of theft. So scrub jays too are interested in property. They have the sense. They'll bring up concepts of property in baboons. So baboons are organized by harems, so males, several females. And when other females come around from a different harem, the males do not try to attract them, they don't try to do anything. They seem to respect them. And so biologists will talk about the baboons as having property or respecting property. They'll put it in quotation marks. And the question is, why do they have to put it in quotation marks? Because maybe it's just not quite like what we do in humans. They'll bring up wolves. Wolves mark their territory. They'll make sure that any of the wolves cross that line, they're prepared to fight. Your dog seems to think the toys that they have are theirs as well. And so we see all these examples out there in the natural occurring world where it looks like other animals have property. But here's some fundamental differences that I think we have in humans. First of all, none of those animals have to be taught how to bark out your territory. Wolves don't take their young around and say, you're a day here, that'll keep the other wolves away. Red squirrels don't teach their young when they're come around their locker horns, get strong, act like they're gonna fight, to scare them away. Does it appear in scrub jays that they teach their young how to do this either? So it's something that they seem to have built in their genetics in terms of how they're going to go about protecting themselves from dispossession. And so you'll see many examples around the animal kingdom of protecting food, territory, and mates. But there's something different about what we humans do. We also have it in things, like foes, things that are portable, that don't seem to go away. Like food, once you eat it, it's gone, completely disappears. There's something different about this thing that persists around time and doesn't seem to go away. And so my question for biologists is, how is it in all these other animals, which seems to be very ancient, that a genetically scheduled behavior regarding food, territory, and mates in non-humans, how did that gradually become something that's socially taught and learned concerning how not to acquire things, and not just food, territory, and mates, in humans? One of the fundamental aspects of property is that we have to teach our kids, every generation, what things they can call mine and what things they can't call mine. And they learn it by the word no. That is an abstract concept. That's fundamentally different than being afraid to get into a fight. Because when your kids are taught to respect what property is, they're not doing it because they're afraid to get beat up. And kids aren't really afraid of it because they're going to jail or anything like that. They're afraid of it because they don't want to disappoint their parents. There's something else going on here that's categorically different. And so when I ask biologists this question, my answer is, it didn't happen that way. There's something different, there's a break. And that's why it's important to look at primatology, so new primatologists. Because we want to look at how non-humans who are really close to us, how they might be slightly different than us, and then yet not get better. So property, so that's my point to the biologists why they're not going to be happy. I'm going to argue that something special about humans. To my colleagues in humanities, where I'm arguing, no, it's not just Western European, and it's not just modern. There's something universal about this, and it's customary. Anthropologists are pretty confident that all human groups have property in tools, utensils, and ornaments. See, one of the things in the modern world, we tend to think of property in terms of land and buildings. And yes, that's different from different people around the world. Not all peoples have property in land, but they all do have it in some of these tools that they make, or the ornaments they make to adorn themselves. That all humans have. And more important than that, every human language has the ability to say, this thing is mine. And you can't break down this thing and mine into any simpler concepts. They are as semantically primitive as you can get, and they're in every language possible. Here are some examples here of very different languages from all over the world, and all of them you can say that. So there seems to be some concepts that are in all human beings about some set of things, maybe it's very small, it could be just some utensils and some ornaments, about which only someone can say, this thing is mine. And more importantly, and this is one of the big differences between us and other animals, it's not just saying this is mine, which is one way we might describe a squirrel defending its territory, or a wolf defending its territory, or a baboon defending its harem. Because what we do, and what we teach our kids is to say, you can say about something, this is mine. We teach them yours. And you don't have property without both mine and yours. And it's that respect that makes us fundamentally different, and then it has to be taught. So while we might have 9 already ingrained in our minds, that no kid has to be taught mine, right? In fact, no parent sits down and says, grab this and say mine, mine. No, they do that all on their own. What they have to be taught is to say, that's yours. And that's an important part of what property is. So, why do we have this custom? Now, I want to call it custom because rights is this modern concept that political scientists, lawyers, philosophers love to use. It's a modern way of thinking about things. But I'm going to argue that somehow it came before then, because we were having property in tools well before we had large democratic states. And so there's something about property that's older than just rights. And it's something that's taught, and I like the word custom because it also imports morality into it. There's something about that. So, I want to give you 4 explanations of why humans have this custom. And I'm going to focus on this talk, most of this talk, on the last 2. But the other ones, if you're interested, are in the book. Hint is here, the material explanation. What is it about us physically that makes property work? So those of you who have some philosophy, maybe have had studied Aristotle, you're going to get a sense here of these 4 different ways of explaining why we have this custom of property. One of them is that we have a physical body with a brain that operates with the mind that perceives the world such that we change the thing, we give it some characteristics that connects a person to a thing. And that characteristic is this concept of mine and also not mine, and yours and not yours. And the idea is that we look at this thing and we perceive it. And now we're getting at where I want to start to make the connection between humans and how we think about things versus how animals and they think about things. And why Adam Smith is so important to understanding how property works. If you read Adam Smith's Theory of Moral Sentiments, you spend time with it, what you begin to understand is that he is not interested in actions in their outcomes. He doesn't explain it by what's happened. He wants to know the origins of why we act the way we do. So those of you who are studying economics, we love talking about utility. We talk about getting a consumption bundle and the utility, and why do I purchase that? Because I want to get that satisfaction and utility. That's using the outcome to explain why I go buying things. Adam Smith starts early. What is the feeling? What is the thinking? What is the knowing that prompts me to do something? And the key part of the Adam Smith story is in what he calls a sentiment. This feeling that prompts you to action. And so we perceive the world, and our feeling is going to be important. And so I want to give you a story and account of property that explains it in its origins, not in its actions, not in its outcomes. So humans, kind of the other formal explanation of why we have the customer property, is that we learn from our mentors the circumstances under which this common abstract form makes a thing mine or not mine, yours and not yours. What do I mean by common abstract form? See, the beauty of when you teach your kids to respect mine and thine is that they learn it in the abstract. They don't learn it just in the particular. It's not just for the thing with that particular example. They're learning it for it in general. I don't know about you, but I still remember the experience of being very, very young, walking into a grocery store and thinking, look at all that stuff. Look at all that candy. And what did I want to do? I wanted to grab some of that. And maybe some of this got out of the grocery store with it. And what's the first thing you learn from your parents as soon as they recognize you have it? That you got to take that back. You're not learning the lesson just about the particular lollipop that you pulled up. You're learning about things that are created and in stores you just can't pull out and take home. That's what I mean by it's abstract. It's in general, and it can apply to different people. So it's not just me, it applies to all my friends and all the kids around you. So it's abstract that we can insert different people, different things, different times, how that notion of property works. The part that I want to focus on in the talk tonight is this one, called the efficient explanation. What is it in the moment that gets property off the ground? So I'm going to argue that humans have the customer property because when someone acts in opposition to a thing that's classified as mine, the resentment we feel prompts us to be an agent of change and defend ourselves. So the form is going to be passed along. Sometimes I'll abide by it, sometimes I won't. Sometimes kids will follow their parents' teaching, sometimes they won't. And that's always there. But in the moment, that's when we're free to choose. Free to choose what kind of person we're going to be. And when somebody tries to take my phone, I'm going to react out of resentment. And that's what gets property off the ground. That resentment that somebody is taking and making another claim, the thing that I call mine. And this is where the experiments are going to be helpful. That Adam Smith interpretation of the experiments that I've designed are going to bring this out, and that'll be the second part of the talk here. Now this is what happens in humanity. So imagine we're going around, and this is what 2-year-olds are learning. They're going to grab things, and they're going to get upset when other people come around and take things. If that happens over and over and over, we're going to have lots of conflicts. A lot of people get resentful. And even worse, humans are very groupish. And we like to share the resentments of our friends. And so when somebody tries to take something from them and they get upset, I get upset with them. And I'm ready to go off. And now they bring their pals and I bring my pals, and what's our problem? We're going to get into a fight. But if I have some way of respecting and understanding when I can make these claims, what happens is that we don't have those resentment feelings get off the ground, and the peace of respecting what things are yours and mine is going to give us peace. And when that happens, we want to keep doing it the same way because we're not fighting and hurting ourselves. But that's not our human nature. Part of our human nature is we do like the other things that other people have. And I might just kind of go be capricious about it and take stuff. And what property does is it gives us regularity, it gives us order, and it gives us peace, particularly when resources are scarce. And so that is what I call the final explanation, and you'll see that come out of the experiment. So the rest of the presentation here is about chapter 4 from the book. So I've given you kind of the code up from chapters 1 through 3. And this is the title, or version of the title, for for chapter 4. And it's what is right is not derived from the rule, but the rule arises from our knowledge of what is right. And this is from a maxim from Julius Paulus in the 3rd century. The first time I read this, I really couldn't get my mind around it. I didn't quite get, what does it mean derived from the rule? What's a rule? What does it mean for a knowledge of what is right? What's this what is right stuff? And so the word that I have, the original Latin down the bottom, that word I-U-S, use, might look kind of foreign to us, but if you think about it in the sense that Latin doesn't have a letter J, but they use I, so it's J-U-S, all you have to really do is add a T to it, and now you understand what we're talking about in the modern world, in English. What is right is about what is just. And that is what this maxim is about. And so I'm going to take you through an experiment, a design experiment, that helped me understand what was going on in this particular statement. And before I do that, I just want to talk a little bit what I mean by a rule. So the place where I found that quotation was here in this book by Rules and Order by F.A. Hayek. And he defines a rule this way. It's a propensity or disposition to act or not act in a certain manner, which will manifest itself in what we'll call a practice or custom. The idea is we want to act, think about it, or not act in a particular way. Think how we're learning about how people and things work. And we do this over and over and over, it becomes tradition, it becomes custom, it becomes a practice. And when we see it over and over and over, that's what we're going to call a rule. I'm going to get more concrete about that. So how do I get to morality here? So one way of defining what just in Latin or use is in Latin is that it's a rule of conduct. And a rule of conduct is a standard that has to be acted. It sounds kind of a place here in the kind of language, but the idea is you're compelled in some way, that you have to behave this particular way, that you have to conduct yourself this way regarding things. And now we can try to disentangle what that maxim is about. Because if there's something in the background and something in the foreground, which one is pulling from where? That's what that maxim is. What is right and the rule. Which one's coming first? And what that maxim is talking about is that in the background we have a sense of what is just or what is right. And we're going to pull to the foreground the rule of what makes that situation just. And what does that come from? It comes out of trying to avoid conflict. How do we define conflict? It's an act that's contrary to what is just or what is use. And you can see it in our word injury. So the just part is the I-U-R-I-A part, the use. And in is a preposition meaning against. So you get against what is just, injury. And so that's what we call conflict. And we're going to understand where that injury comes from when we consider conflict and how we get ourselves out of that. So here's my proposition, that a rule of property regarding people and things arises from our background knowledge of what is right regarding people and things. So we're going to pull the rule from our understanding what everyone seems to universally understand as what is right or what is just. And so here's the experiment that I designed for my undergraduate. So I was trained as experimental economist. What I do is I create virtual worlds. I put people in them, and I ask them to make decisions that they want. Whatever you want to do, it's up to you. Here are the rules of this world. And I pay them for for the decisions they make. So in this particular experiment, they can make up to basically a rate of $35 an hour as a maximum, and as low as, well, they can leave with almost nothing, depending on what they do this group. And so I created here a virtual world of a village of 8 people. So the rectangles are fields. So think of it where you produce stuff, where you grow stuff. And then they consume them in their houses. And so in this case, this is a picture of person number 2 who has a greenhouse, that's number 2, and their field is in green, and everyone else's is in the red. And they said, all right, you decide how much you want time producing red, and how much time do you want to produce blue. And I give them the characteristics of how that works. They decide what they want to do, how much they want to produce. And then we tell them in the instructions, and we purposely use the passive voice. Items that have been moved to your house generate earnings for you this way. Because we don't tell them all what they could discover in terms of how things move around in the world. So they just tell them things are in the field, things end up in the house, here's how you click to do that kind of stuff. But we don't tell them that you can move from things from any field, in any house, anywhere you want. That's what they have to figure out, and that's what they're going to discover. So the experiment starts with people in pairs. So that only 1 and 2 see each other, only 3 and 4 see each other, 5 and 6, and then 7 and 8. Then we merge them into 2 groups of 4, so all the people in the top see each other, all the people in the bottom see each other. And then for the last 10 periods, we throw all 8 of them together. And in the middle, they can talk. And so we are recording in real time everything they're saying to each other about what's happening on the screen. And so that is the world. They don't know anything. They're kind of like a character on Star Trek being beamed down to the planet, and we're saying, now live with these other people, make it go. And I, as experimenter, I'm on the other side of the one-way glass, and I'm watching them, seeing what they're doing, and I'm looking at the screen, seeing how things are moving around, what they're saying, and I'm going to try to make sense of the world as they make sense of the world. So that is the basic experiment. Now, when I said I'm trying to talk about how property works, how's that process? People say, well, you can't talk about property. You said you gave them their house. How is that talking about the origins of property? You said, you own the house, you own the field. Well, great thing about experiments is I can always design a new one. And so, I want to look at a world where things are free for anyone to take. Where would that be? Well, this is inspired by the Yale Law professor Robert Ellickson, who wrote a fantastic book called Order Without Law. He was interested in 18th and 19th century whalers. Why whalers? Because out in the ocean, no one owns it. No one can make any claims to it. And since there are rules out there for how you go around whaling. And what he was interested in was, what did they actually do? Because was it chaotic? Was it everyone for themselves? Was there conflict? Or how did they seem to settle those particular disputes? How did they get their way out of conflict? And so we created a world with little stick figures who are going around the sea. The big white area is the sea. They can only see so far, so you can see the gray there. And they're trying to go catch and attach themselves to a circle. So in this experiment, there are 8 people. Look at all these. This is an example of all, 5 out of the 6 people trying to play in the same white circle that's been moving around, just like a whale. And we hypothesize it here, just like Alexson did in the natural coding world. What kind of rules do people come up with? So I'm going to leave kind of details of that. What's important here is that I'm going to take their conversations from this world, the conversations from the other world that I created, and they're all going to have the same basic theme, even though the worlds are very different. They're all thinking about the problem in a very similar way. So, let me now show you some results from that first experiment. So here we are in the upper right. What I'm measuring here is how much money they're earning. So the baseline of 0 is the point at which I'm all by myself. I figured out how to produce red and blue in a way that just makes my earnings, maximizes my own earnings, and I don't care about anyone else. So in the language of economics, we call it authority, all by yourself. That's what that 0 line is. Now, if you're worse than that, that's because you're not getting the stuff and somebody else getting the stuff's being wasted. When you're above 0, It's because I'm producing more of the good I'm good at, and you're producing more of the good that you're good at, and we're trading. And so in this particular world, we are here in period 16. They're all in pairs, and you'll notice here pair 1 and 2 at the top, they're completely specialized. So 1 is producing all red, and 2 is producing all blue. And they get 110 blues and 130 reds between the two of them. And you're going to see what they do. Now the other pairs, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, you notice they're not completely specialized, they're doing something else. And 7 and 8 are completely specialized. And you're going to be able to see what they're talking about. So a black arrow is moving from yourself to yourself somehow from your fielded house. Reds are going from other people to you. And greens are from you to other people. And you'll notice here that 1 and 2 have stopped on 90 and 30 for not 1 and 80 and 40 for 2. That is the most that they can earn. They are earning in that 100 seconds 90 cents and 80 cents in less than 2 minutes. And so that is the ratio between red and blue that person 1 needs, 3 to 1, and person 2 needs 2 to 1, 2 blue and 1 red. They're maximizing their earning. That is what's leading to this 50% efficiency. You know the bottom pair is doing the same thing. So half the people are getting as much money out of me as possible. The people in the middle are not. Let's keep this going. I want to skip ahead. And by this point, everyone's wondering. And now I'm going to play out what they're saying. Everyone is stealing. If everyone finds a good ratio, we can moderate the ratios. And all make money. Notice lots of red lines going on. If all odds make red and all even make blue, everyone aim for about 60 or 70% potential profit. Stop taking things from each other's house. If people are greedy, no one wins. Well, someone wins, but only 1 or 2. When only one person wins, that's when the revolution starts, and the burnings. And you notice the efficiency starting to drop. Red lines going everywhere, things moving all over the place. This entire economy collapses. So I'm going to use more of these chat transcripts to take us through an understanding of what Julius Paulus was talking about. And I want to begin with the theory of what does it mean to be for the concept of what is right. So here are some people saying, D, should we be trying to help each other, or is selfishness the way to go? That's a super good plan. If everyone just agrees not to steal other people's, then we'll all get more. That is very true. I think so too. True, I'm down, so let's just do that. Remember the first question here. Help each other or selfishness? Here's another pair. Are we working together or against each other? I think we're supposed to work together. Okay, sounds fun. What's first? What's second? It's a way to collaborate and help each other or to steal from each other. So notice that they're posing the question, what is the right thing to do? What's right in here? When they pose it as cooperation or working together or collaboration first, that's what they're interested in. The second one was, is that what we're really interested in doing? The latter. And this word steal comes up over and over. So I got to look at how many times in kind of American English, in British English, we use the word steal. And in our transcript, it comes up 50 times more than the average comes up in a written corpus. It's over and over and over. Now, all I describe is that you make red things, you make blue things, you move things, And they're calling it stealing. Or I tell them, here's a little circle, and here's how people connect to it. And they say, 2 people clicking on the same circle, that's stealing. They didn't get that from me. They brought all of that in. Somehow they're adding all this moral connotation to these little acts of clicking on a screen. What leads them to do that? Why do they perceive someone going into my house and pulling it out as stealing? Why does someone perceive 2 people clicking on the same circle as stealing? Well, first thing they have to do is they have to create a community. It's not just me, it's a collaboration. It's we're working together. It's doing something together to make more money. Eve says, you want to do this the right way. What is the right way? The right way is I produce red, you make the blues, and then we split it. No one gets 100% profit, but we both win. That's what I've been doing, then you started stealing. They're not a we. You've been doing one thing, this is what I'm doing. Here's another little pulling from a different experiment. Do you want to start talking about maximizing your production, or do you want to keep fighting over it? It's you and me. That's not a we. So it benefits all if no one was a thief. A. The point is to make a big profit? Yes, but to make a long-term profit, teamwork helps a lot. Property is a custom embedded in a community. It's not just you, it's not just me, it's a we. And somehow we have to create that community to get this thing called property off the ground. And it can be quick. Let's agree not to hit once someone else is on it. A lot of money is lost. Ha ha, true. My partner and I did that and it worked well. Yep. Agreed. Agreed. D, C, little laughter, ha ha, guess not. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. So all you have to do is bring it up, and people are eager to create a community, and a community that benefits everyone. And that is the final explanation of property right there. You want to create a peaceful order that regularizes what we're doing in this particular world. Here G Nature talking about everyone wins, right. In this experiment, the access to other people's stuff really just causes problems. Yeah, let's make some money. Must, wahaha, order fights chaos, I love it. Ha ha ha, no taking, asking you shall receive. The only chaos is if other half doesn't play nicely. Seriously, people, you're going to mess it up for everyone because this will turn into everyone messing each other's up and no one winning. They're trying, property is a way of settling our tempers, keeping everyone calm and creating an order so we can go about doing things about specializing in trading and making money. But it is not inevitable. And this is the thing that surprised me when I first ran this experiment. I spent my career working on building markets and understanding how they work and how they create all these gains from trade that we teach our students. I've worked with building strategic interactions where people will trust each other. All the money is on the line and that trust is reciprocated and people do better than just acting in their own interest. And I'm amazed at how well and how often people seem to find a way to do this. And I run these experiments and all hell breaks loose. So our first instinct is, well, how is it can I help all these other ones to work? And here's an example of one where they're not going to create a we, and it's not going to be inevitable. And you might not be able to read it all, so I'll make sure I read it for you. So D says, look, if we all stop stealing, we can all help each other maximize. Yeah, B, push it. But we can help you. No. B is not having any. What do you need? How many blue for red? We can give you what you need without hurting us. If everyone else did it, we were trying to help each other. No one gets screwed if you don't steal. You aren't making any money now. And we've all been helping each other the whole time. Chill out, it's just a game. So we are reputable. It's a game for money, real money. Why are you even here? we can help you earn more. B is bond. If you let us, and then you would stop hurting us. We are working together, but B doesn't want to help. B, why would you steal my red for someone else? Just because. Stop whining. God, when will it end? Your money, you're taking my money, real money. So if B doesn't want to be a part of the group, it's not going to happen. And this is where Adam Smith, when I saw that transcript and had read Adam Smith in the Fair Moral Summits, that's when I saw the connection of what the problem is and how you can properly walk it around. In the example where it fails, where B doesn't want to be a part of the group. So I've taken an actual quote, this is a quotation from Adam Smith, and I'm going to put it in the context of B and all the other ones, A, C, and D. And we'll call A, C, and D the we. So to disturb the we's happiness merely because it stands in the way of B's own, to take from A, C, and D what is of real use to A, C, and D, merely because it may be equal, or more use to B, or to indulge in this matter at the expense of other people, the natural preference which every man has for his own happiness above that of other people is what no impartial spectator can go along with. Though it may be true, therefore, that every individual in his own breast naturally prefers himself to all mankind, yet he dares not look mankind in the face and avow that he acts according to this principle, and that how natural soever may be to him, it must always appear excessive and extravagant to them. B is to them in every respect as good as A, C, and D. They do not enter into that self-love by which B prefers himself so much to the we and cannot go along with the motive for which he hurts A, C, and D. B is an outlier. The rest of us are concerned about how other people think about us. We are concerned about the impartial person in the world who looks at what we do, and that matters about people and things. B didn't abide by that, but A, C, and D are very much concerned about that, and they see what he's doing is harm. All they're in the computer lab, just clicking around. They get paid some money, but they view it as him harming them. That's the beginning of property. That's the resentment that they have towards B, that he is hurting them. And they're trying to find a way, a solution to get out of that. It is harm that is at the beginning of property. Because, and this is what is right, that precedes anything dealing with people and things, is that there can be no proper motive for hurting our neighbor. And B's clicking on red and blue items in the fields and houses not under his control is an act contrary to what is right. It is an injustice. It is an injury. And it's not just physical harm. The word injury means something contrary to what is right. The form of the rule has to fit what is right. So the form of the rule in the houses and fields experiment has to fit what is right. And the form of the rule has to fit what is right in the wide open sea with circles moving around. And this is where you begin to see why property is customarily different in different parts of the world. Because different people have different things, they have different environments, they have different histories, they have different tempers, they're different people. And so they will all have a notion of harm, but the problem of how to keep from harming each other might be different from different groups, which is why Western Europeans had property and land, but Native Americans did not. And this comes up in the experiment as well. So in the houses and fields experiments, they say, here are the rules. Let's start with the rule of don't take stuff from other people's houses and fields. The fields are fair game. Let's decide on that from now on. Nobody takes anything from a house. If you have to share, you can put it in your field. So in the field house experiment, we gave them the green part of a field and the green part of a house. And when you kind of have pairs, you go to group of 4 to group of 8, that's a very natural line that they break. Now I had a graduate student who decided, let me just try like put all 8 people in there at once. And what happens with all 8 people at once is things are flying all over the place. And then when they come up with a solution, they come up with a different rule. They allow things in the fields to be open to anyone. You just leave it out there, and then other people will take what they need. So they have a different rule. Because the fields were never claimed by anyone, because everyone was taking everything from the beginning, so they come up with a different rule for them to solve the problem. Even though the screen looks exactly the same as the people who went from groups of 2 to 4 to 8. The people who are all 1-8 from the beginning have a different history. They have a different problem and a different way of solving it. So part of coming to grips that property is founded on resentment is that this seems like a negative thing in human nature. And Adam Smith is very clear the importance of what resentment is and when to use it. He says, resentment seems to have been given to us by nature for defense, and for defense only. It is a safeguard of justice and a security of innocence. It prompts us to beat off mischief, which is attempted to be done to us. Each individual is naturally an antecedent to the institution of civil government, regarded as having a right to defend himself from injuries. So he's saying that we have this notion of resentment to protect us from the harm. And this is the part that's universal to all humans. And you might even say it goes, that the resentment can go beyond just humans. You poke a bear, you go after a bear cub, they're going to come after you. What humans have done is we now can understand other people's resentment and kind of get our way out of it. So resentment prompts us to retaliate that which is already done, that the offender may be made to repent his injustice. And the whole key, the whole problem that has to be worked out is when is it just and when is it unjust? I give you a specific example here of the harm, the resentment, and how you get to a rule. Dear, you took mine, haha. Whatever happened to our deal? Haha, I'm the best, I'm the master. I know, right. D, you suck. I learned the best from C. Okay, everybody, only steal from D. Haha. Haha, hey, no fair. Deal, deal, deal. Haha. Blue, dude, come on, sorry. Or Dudette, you in? Steal from D, no one else. I will. Me too. Sweet. D is being made to repent for the harm that he has been doing to everyone else. That's what the resentment is for. And when it's focused here in a group of 6 to 8 people, it can be effective in getting the group to establish a rule of property. It's that resentment that gets it off the ground. It's what gives meaning to property as a practice. 1, we're predisposed to resent harm. We don't like it. We can't have it in order to fit. And 2, members of our community mutually empathize about avoiding that harm. So A, B, and C are all understanding what D is about. They understand the harm that everyone is getting from this. And they're trying to convince D to empathize with them too. And then, once you have a rule, the community feels morally compelled through resentment to commit to that rule. So property is a universal and human custom. It's customary because it's built into our moral traditions that we pass on from every generation to another generation. And its point is to secure us from injury. And so a rule of property comes out of our background knowledge of what is right, which includes protecting us from real and positive hurt. So what you see in these experiments is that property is not the cause of problems in the world. Property is the solution to conflict in the world. And Samuel Pufendorf, who I'm sure Adam Smith read and knew very well, put it this way, that the falsity of that common saying, mine and thine are the cause of all wars and quarrels in the world. For on the contrary, a distinction of mine and thine was rather introduced to prevent all contention. The purpose of property is peace. Thank you.
If you'd like to ask questions, we've got a couple of microphones available. Just go up to the control mic booth and they'll put you on the loudspeaker. So I'll start. You've done some work with non-human primates. How does that work relate to what you shared with us?
So one of the reasons why I was attracted to working with primatologists was I learned, well, first of all, when I look at experiment data like this, I tend to think about, make judgments. How would I think about this? How are they thinking about this? And I don't think twice that I bring in all my understanding of the world to interpret what other people are doing. And when I talk to my primatologist friends, they can't make that assumption about their subjects. They can't assume that the chimpanzee and the capuchin monkey understands the world like they understand the world. And it's that kind of humility that got me interested in trying to understand non-human primates. That I should not assume that they're behaving or thinking about the world the way I think about it. And so the basics of this is to start with how non-human primates interact in very simple situations. And so I've been using game theory models, and we've been comparing with Sarah Brosnan at Georgia State University how two capuchins and two chimpanzees coordinate or fail to coordinate, how they will work together or not work together on a problem, which is prior to anything talking about problems. And so, we find from there that humans are already somehow very different in these very simple ways from non-humans. In fact, we think about the bigger picture in a way that they don't. They kind of think in the moment. And so that is important here. Property is not just about right here, right now. And all the non-human primates are always right here, right now, and property extends beyond that. And so that's what I learned to appreciate from working with primatologists related to property. I still have to have a debate. I have not convinced Sarah Brosnan that property is only human. She thinks it's still enough humans, and so we're going to work that out. My argument to her is that property has to extend in time here and now, and we can't get those non-human primates out of here. You can't get a chimpanzee to trade one thing for another thing. Even if you know they like the thing that another chimp has more than the thing they have, they're not going to give it up to get something of a higher value. The reason why I don't think they can do that is they can't envision a future where the things are switched and we're both better off. They only have the thing right here, right now. And that's what we need to get exchange off of that. I have to understand that's yours, this is mine, and in the future, if we trade, I have a new thing called mine, and you have a new thing called mine. That is the power of property in order to get trade off the ground, and that's why you can't get chimpanzees or any other animal to trade one thing for another.
Yeah, the concept of property leading to peace, how would you say that a Marxist would address that question?
So, Rousseau famously says that somehow the first person who convinced somebody else to put a stake in the ground and follow the line and duke everyone else. And so the tension is, what is the actual cause? So people will claim that property is based on violence. And I think that's how a Marxist might respond to that. That property requires me beating you off and keeping you away from my stuff. And think of property as, I'm sitting on my front porch with my shotgun, and if you come over too far, I'm going to shoot. And so I need violence in order to get people to respect that. Or other people have stuff, and I want to go take that stuff. And so that creates violence. The property, the fact that I have stuff and other people want to take it from me, that's the violence. And so you have to have violence in order to get property off the ground. I'm arguing that that mixes the final ordering process with in the moment. So what I call the efficient cause is in the moment. So when somebody wants to take this phone in the moment, and I want to beat them off from doing that, that's not me enforcing property. That is me being resentful of them trying to bring harm. What property is a community backing me up when I say that this thing is wrong. And so when we then go after the D or all these other people who are taking stuff, what we're doing is we're trying to teach the people how to create peace. And so I think the problem is that Marxists look at just any fighting as a reason why we have that property exists. And I'm saying no, people are by nature impudent, malicious, and capricious. And what we're trying to do is make that livable. And so I think they have it backwards in that sense. So I have to try to convince them that no, humans have a way of trying to orderly create peace. And that any incursion on that, that's where the violence is. It's not about property, it's about somebody not able to do property. And when other people back me up, that creates peace.
Hi, so I had a question regarding your sort of ideas such as like empathy, fear of retaliation, respect for property, preventing theft. Now, I was wondering, what do you think is the strongest deterrence of theft? And by an extent, do you think that money in itself, like as a concept, has to do with it?
So that's a very economist way of thinking about property. So you'll look at major textbooks, and they'll tell you the reason why we have property rights is so that the government will defend these things, is so that I will go around producing stuff so it doesn't get taken. And so in a sense, is the government is the reason why we don't have stealing. And actually, I want to argue that deterrence is not what gets us to be a good person. It's learning the custom, learning what it is to be a good person and how to conduct yourself, that is the best way not to have theft. That sticks are not a way to get people to go along. What's my evidence on this? So if you have a bicycle that gets stolen and you go to the police, what do? Nothing. So how does that help me understand all the bikes that don't go unstolen? So all these bikes are not being stolen. The government actually doesn't go around enforcing stolen bikes, so why is it that there aren't more bikes being stolen? And so there's got to be something else going on there. And so the biggest deterrence is not actually a deterrence, it's a moral concern for yourself and how you are viewed in the community that gets property off the ground. And so you can see now why that might not happen. Not every group of humans is going to get along. I've seen that with my undergraduates. Get a random group of 8 people, some of them are not going to get along. And what I've learned now from the experiments is I can't help them overcome that. With my co-authors, we've tried our darndest to get groups that aren't getting along to get along by giving them some other tools to help with it. And all that does is make things worse. I'll give you one quick example. One quick example. So, we gave in the house and field experiment, we gave people the power to protect other people from people taking stuff. And so this was inspired by some of my libertarian friends who argue, well, we'll just have somebody who's comparative advantage in violence and protection. They'll trade stuff for that. That'll make the world a nice paradise. And so the way we gave them these tools, we said, all right, after first, I don't remember, 15 periods, the person who has taken the least and produces the most, we're going to give you that power. What happens? We have this have this woman who's not produces the most stuff, takes the least, we give her the power. What does she do? She protects herself, takes from everyone else. And the people say, why are you doing that? Because you were stealing before. Now I got the power, I'm going to do it. The problem had to be solved within that group, not me giving the tool, just granting power to some random person in the group who seemed to be, at the time, someone who steals. We gave people another version, a way to advertise and commit themselves not to taking stuff. But one of our referees said, like, people can't commit to it, that's the problem. Not stealing is a commitment problem. So we said, okay, we'll give people a commitment problem. They click on a little button, they get a little star on their house. I can't take from anyone. What happens? People are convinced, 3 people click on there, and then the last person doesn't. And then he's free to take from everyone, and they can't take it back. And now they're really in trouble because they can't retaliate. So we created all these tools to help them, and they are not getting on it. They have their own problems of their group, their own kind of way that people are thinking about the problem, and me from the top is not going to help them. And that was very humbling that I couldn't give them the mechanism, because part of my career is about how to build mechanisms for trading electricity and make the world a better place, and I couldn't make the world a better place with property, because it deals with people on the ground.
It's kind of interesting, right, this idea that the rule comes out of what is standard, right? Did you see the group's decision of what is just shift, like maybe as people got accumulated more wealth?
So in the House of Field experiment, there really things kind of it's a little more basic. But we wanted to get at that question with the whaling experiment, the seed. So one of the rules that you see whalers adopt, particularly in the North Atlantic, is called fast fish, loose fish. That is, you attach the harpoon to the whale, you attach the experiment, the line to the stick figure, and no one else goes after it if it's attached. But if the whale gets away, anyone else will go after that whale. And then whaling in the natural aquarium world moved off the coast of North America, and the prey changed. So the prey off the North Atlantic were called right whales. You know why they're called right whale? Because they're the right whale to hunt. Because they have no teeth, they don't sink when they die, and they swim near the surface. So like, if you're going to go hunting for whales, that's the right one to go for. Then, when hunting moved off North America, they were hunting sperm whales. They have teeth, they died, and so the idea of attaching a harpoon to the whale wasn't working as well, and so it changed. And so Bob Wilson said, well, why is that? What's going on there? He noticed that the rule was slowly changing because the prey changed. And again, this gets back to my point that different people have different problems based on the things that they have to deal with. Sperm whales are different than right whales. They had to get a different rule. So I tried to implement that same version. I changed the prey on them. As soon as I change the prey, the amount of conflict goes way up. They start fighting more because it's not the same kind of rule and it's not effective anymore. What I didn't get was the ability for them to come up with a new rule and to solve the problem. So yes, I can see rules break down, but I haven't gotten to the point where I understand it well enough to see them or give them flexibility to have it evolve. But you're asking the kind of question, how does social change work? How does it work with property? We're going through it now. When I don't want to date myself here, but when MP3s come out, there was a whole world of book things being pulled and downloaded here and there, and the music industry was all concerned about what's going on. Madonna was really worried she was going to make more money. Metallica was really concerned about this. And what happened? The world changed. Now we have streaming service. No one wants to go around stealing stuff. I just paid $10 and I got as much music as I want. So the rule changed. We had to change how with music technology delivered it. And then our norms about property changed. So we got rid of the problem with that.
Does this framework allow for other systems of property other than just the colloquial personal property, such as communal property?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So, I initially intended to kind of do the big book on property, and I realized just dealing with things like this, chattels, as we call them, things that move around, was hard enough. And so, what you're asking for is, are there things, and how could you understand things that I can't claim as mine, and no one can claim as mine? And what are those kind of things? So, what the story of my book is, I argue the first tools that might be the origins of property are basically spears. Because you put a spear in your hand, it is basically a part of you. In fact, you feel through the tip of it. And you play sports, baseball, right? You feel the ball through the bat. Your mind has reorganized the world such that you're kind of in the thing that you're a tool that you've made you. And it's a part of you. And so that was the part I wanted to solve, that I am in this thing. And that tends to be things that I can make by myself, all over the world, any individual. Those are things you can claim as mine. But when you work together, say the Native Alaskans on a canoe, no one person is responsible for that canoe, then that is something about which no one can say this is mine. And so it's a different kind of thing. So I think you can think about the concepts in how to understand that, but you won't have mine as the core of it when it's communal, because no one can claim it's mine. So we've got to have something much more complex in order to make communal work. And so basically you can start thinking, all those other people can't use this. But I would argue that's different than claiming it's mine. And so we have to get a more abstract idea that's built off of mine for a community. So, I think it's worth exploring, but I haven't gone there. But that's the problem that needs to be kind of worked out conceptually. How is it that without mine, we get people respecting boundaries of things? Short answer is I haven't gotten it yet.
Hi, it's me again. So do you think that humans, the reason why we react so strongly towards theft or maybe destruction of our property is because kind of like what you were saying with the spear, we kind of see our property as an extension of ourselves and our ideas. Like the way how someone would wrap a big anime sticker on a sports car and seeing someone vandalize is like, hey, not only are you vandalizing my property, but you're vandalizing an idea I agree with or I identify with. Do you think that's why we react so strongly to things? It's because we can see a little bit of ourselves in the property which we own?
Yes, that is the argument I make in the book. So I am in this thing, I tap around, I feel through the thing. In a sense, I am in it. And what I argue is humans have abstract thought, and what non-human can do is I can put this thing down, and by my abstract powers of thought and your abstract powers of thought, I'm still part of that thing. And the concept that's in my body is the concept of I. You move the physical body and I go with it. This concept of mind is what we put in things. And where the thing goes, the idea of mind, it goes with it. It goes with the physicality of this very thing itself. And so somehow our abstract powers got to have this concept in mind that goes into this very thing like this. And then, once we try to solve problems of conflict, I get you to call this yours to me. And then I also have to do the same thing to you. And that's why property needs mine and I. You need mine and yours. Because then when you respect these things and I respect those things, now we're not fighting anymore. And so it's because we put it, I argue in the book, we put it conceptually inside the thing itself. And it's in the ball. And I'll give you one example why it's so natural. So lawyers like to argue that there's different kinds of way property moves from one person to another. One is this idea of accession. I'm arguing this conceptual way is very simple. So if I have a cow and I have property in a cow that walks over to another property, I still can claim that cow. And go over there, person, the cow wandered onto the property, they can't just take it. I can find the cow. Now when the cow gives birth to a calf, the same thing is happening. Property's in the cow. Cow gives birth to a calf that was in the cow. Out comes the calf. I also have property in the calf because it was part of it. So it's inside the thing that's really important to how our property works. And we connect it to a person.
And one final sort of addition to that, do you think that philosophy kind of sort of also attaches itself to concepts such as like groups or tribes, or maybe even to an extent countries? Because a lot of times I feel like sort of things like with war, a big aspect of propaganda is, oh, we are unified, they are not. So do you think kind of like that sort of the same sort of little monkey brain center of our sort of thinking area that we call this electrified piece of meat is kind of what allows us to sort of unify towards common goals and against common enemies?
Yes, so the three most social species on the planet are wolves, chimpanzees, and humans. And we're also the only three species that intentionally kill another member of its own species just to get rid of it. So with our groupishness and our sociality comes this fierce anti-sociality to the outside. And my primatologist friends can tell you very harrowing stories of what happens when different groups of chimpanzees come in contact with each other. So they're over to my house, we're working on a project, and say, oh, you should look at this video. What happens? I'm bringing this up with the fierce competition. So there's a group of chimpanzees, and what they do, and they still don't understand how it works, but all of a sudden, a tribe of chimpanzees will get very still, they'll form a single line, and they'll start patrolling their territory. So you see that, cool, that's really interesting. They're very quiet. And then all of a sudden you hear some screaming, and there is a mother chimpanzee with a baby chimpanzee, and lots of screaming, yelling, and then the next scene, you see them eating the scapula of the baby chimpanzee. That's how violent and capricious chimpanzees are. And it was truly horrifying to watch right there on video. But it's us and them is very ancient, and it's going to build into this us and them. And it's part of the benefit. The benefits of our pro-sociality is that it comes with some anti-sociality as well.
So on the physical manifestation of property, or the extension, I guess, I've often wondered if it becomes kind of the physical manifestation of time. I mean, that's something we can see a time, right? Because it was the effort to earn it, or however it came to us. And so I'm wondering if that is something that separates us from chimpanzees or whatever. It's kind of that memory.
Well, what we have is the ability to imagine time outside now. And so, yes, I think part of what makes the custom of property work is that we understand that there was a history before now about somebody. When I pick what we find, this is what I didn't appreciate before I wrote the book, is that what we are teaching our kids is what is a created good versus things that are naturally occurring in the world. And that kids pick up on this very quickly. And what the lesson when we go to the grocery store is that stuff that's been created related to time, some before now, those are things you just can't go around thinking is mine. But you know, seashells and twigs or whatever things on the ground is kind of open areas, those are things you claim. Kids pick up on that. That's also what I meant when I was talking about it's abstract. It's a different kind of thing, a created thing. Now you can't teach a chimpanzee the difference between an abstract idea of a created thing and a non-created thing. They're just things right here, right now. And so yeah, that's the way I argue time is related to property. Imagine the world before now, and also after now. I mean, property, when I claim this is mine, and somebody tries to take it from me, I'm not worried just about now. I'm also trying to set a precedent for the future, and other people around me respect that.
Hey Bart, this is great. I really appreciate it. I love your work. There's just a problem that's rattling around in my mind. It may not be a problem at all, but of course, your theory is that property rights are what we use to keep everybody from harming one another. But the absence of conferring a benefit can be perceived as a harm, right? And you can't answer that question until you have a concept of rights. So you're using, you know, an embedded concept of right to explain property rights. So let's just give an example. So suppose I'm in a parking lot and I ran my cart into somebody else's car, okay? Clearly I've harmed them. But what happens if I'm in a parking lot, and this has actually happened to me, and somebody left the cart there and it's rolling towards somebody's car? And I could easily reach out and stop that cart, all right? But I have no right or obligation to do it. I do have an obligation to avoid intentionally running my cart into. So, have at it.
So, I think the point of my project is to argue how it gets off the ground, and I think the harm idea behind it is the starting point of property. I would argue that it has these abstract ideas that will make it work. Your abstract idea is actually more complicated. It's an absence of it is another idea. You could have done this, but didn't do this. And so that's another kind of problem. And so I wouldn't argue that property is only the stuff I've talked about in terms of avoiding harm. It's going to be a whole lot more. There are going to be all these other things, what be and things, and how I deal with people that are also going to have rules that come about it. But my point is, I think this is the explanation of how I get it off the ground. I couldn't use the lack of something as a way of getting the whole custom off the ground. That's what my project was about. How do I get it off the ground, and why do humans get it off the ground and not anyone else?
So is the tractability of your model a problem?
So what I'm saying is those are other problems beyond what I'm interested in, and that just like the communal problem, it's also something you want to, if you're interested in property, you got to think about that. I would argue this, is there a way to start with this and then build up to another problem that I would argue is probably on top of it, and I might be able to convince myself has to be secondary to the first one.
Hey Bart, thank you for your talk. Are there conditions where harm is done and resentment doesn't follow?
Oh, yes. Well, I guess I'm hesitant off the top of my head to argue. I mean, I don't know if I can. You have an example?
Unintentional or second-degree murder, or like steal or buying something from a pawn shop that, say you buy a bicycle from a pawn shop that previously stolen and sold to the pawn shop.
Yes. So that is kind of the beauty of having abstract thought, that and we take seriously how people are thinking at the time that acts are done, that they will then be punished or not punished in a different way. And so, if that's what you mean, yes, you can create harm, and it might not have resentment because it's totally just to the luck of the world out there, or bad luck of the world, that some things happen. And we do treat the world differently. It turns out Adam Smith has a pretty sophisticated model of trying to understand those problems, and why we still hold people responsible, even though chance might be the big reason for it, is because we want to make sure that people are still sensitive and aware, and so we're going to still make people be morally responsible for things that are beyond them, even if they couldn't change them. But we don't treat it as harshly as intentionally trying to do exactly that same thing. And so Smith has a pretty complicated model of trying to disentangle those cases.
Well, thank you. Everyone still here? And we hope to see you in the fall for the Grant Foundation lecture, and next spring for the next Adam Smith lecture. Thank you.
Yes.